Excuse me, the classroom is for students only. Maintenance can wait until after class. The words hit Marcus Johnson like a familiar punch he'd learned to expect but never got used to. He stood at the front of Lecture Hall 301 at Boston University, wearing a simple button-down shirt, dark jeans, and his kufi, the traditional Islamic cap he'd worn since converting to Islam 10 years ago. The student who'd spoken, a blonde woman in designer athleisure, didn't even look up from her phone as she dismissed him. Marcus adjusted his worn messenger bag and said nothing, just stood there, waiting. More students filed in, chatting, laughing, claiming seats in the 200-person lecture hall. None acknowledged him. Several gave him suspicious glances. One guy actually asked, "Yo man, can you come back later? We have class starting." Have you ever been invisible in a room full of people who should see you? Marcus checked his watch. 9:58 a.m. 2 minutes until his first lecture as a teaching assistant for advanced quantum mechanics. The culmination of 6 years of grueling PhD work, countless nights studying while working part-time at the campus library, and more rejection letters than acceptance ones. He was the first person in his family to attend college, the first to pursue a doctorate, the first to stand at the front of a classroom at one of America's most prestigious universities, and these students thought he was the janitor. "Seriously, dude, you need to leave," another student said, this one in a varsity jacket. "Professor Chen doesn't like interruptions." "I'm not interrupting," Marcus replied quietly. "Then what are you doing just standing there?" "Waiting for 10 a.m. The students exchanged confused looks. One pulled out her phone and started recording, her TikTok live stream activated. "This guy won't leave our quantum mechanics class. Campus security incoming?" Viewer count, 23, 67, 134. But here's what nobody in that classroom knew yet. At exactly 10 a.m., Professor Diana Chen entered through the back door. Distinguished, Asian American, one of the leading physicists in the country. Students immediately straightened up, put phones away, opened laptops. "Good morning, everyone," Professor Chen said, walking to the front. "Before we begin, I want to introduce someone very important." She gestured to Marcus. "This is Marcus Johnson. He's your teaching assistant for this semester. He'll be leading discussion sections, grading assignments, and occasionally guest lecturing." The silence was profound and uncomfortable. The blonde student who dismissed him turned red. The guy in the varsity jacket slouched in his seat. The girl live streaming suddenly angled her phone down. But Professor Chen wasn't done. Marcus is a PhD candidate in his 6th year. His dissertation on quantum entanglement applications has been shortlisted for the Bergman Prize, one of the most prestigious awards in theoretical physics. He has 2 published papers in Physical Review Letters, and he's co-authoring a 3rd with me. She paused, letting the credentials sink in. He's also the only person in this room, including me, who can solve the equation I'm about to put on the board. You won't believe what happened in the next 5 minutes. Professor Chen wrote an impossibly complex equation across the whiteboard, symbols and variables that looked like a foreign language. She stepped back. "This equation represents a quantum state that most physicists spend years trying to understand. Whoever can solve this gets an automatic A on the midterm." 200 students stared at the board. Some pulled out calculators, others frantically Googled, most just looked lost. Professor Chen waited 30 seconds. "Anyone?" Silence. "Marcus, would you mind?" Marcus walked to the board. No hesitation, no notes, just pure understanding. His hand moved across the whiteboard with practiced precision. Numbers flowed, variables canceled, complex integrations simplified into elegant solutions. His explanation was clear, methodical, brilliant. 3 minutes later, the solution was complete. Professor Chen examined it, nodded approvingly. Perfect, as always. She turned to the stunned class. That equation stumped me for 2 weeks when I first encountered it. Marcus solved it in under 4 minutes. This is why he's your TA. The girl who'd been live streaming had forgotten to turn off her phone. The viewer count had climbed to 3,847. Comments exploded. Yo, he's a genius! They thought he was the janitor! This is the most satisfying thing I've ever seen. That's what assumptions get you. Marcus returned to a spot at the front of the room. Still calm, still professional. But something had shifted in the air. Mr. Johnson, the blonde student, raised her hand, her voice small. I'm really sorry. You assumed a black man in a kufi couldn't be a physicist. You assumed I was here to clean, not to teach. You assumed my appearance told you everything you needed to know about my intellect. The room was dead silent. You weren't wrong to assume, Marcus continued, his voice measured. You were taught to assume. By media, by society, by seeing physics departments that look nothing like me. But now you know better. The question is, what will you do with that knowledge? Professor Chen took over. This is a quantum mechanics class, but today's first lesson is about a different kind of observation problem. The observer effect doesn't just apply to particles, it applies to people. What we expect to see often determines what we think we're seeing. She gestured to Marcus. You saw a black Muslim man, and your brain filled in a narrative. Janitor, security, lost student, anything except brilliant physicist. That's bias. And bias doesn't belong in science or anywhere else. The lecture that followed was tense. Students who dismissed Marcus now hung on his every word when Professor Chen asked him to explain concepts. The contrast between their initial disrespect and their current attention was stark and uncomfortable. But the real reckoning came after class. As students filed out, several approached Marcus. The live streamer, her name was Emma, was first. Mr. Johnson, I'm so sorry. I recorded the whole thing. It's already viral. Should I delete it? Marcus considered. How many views? 15,000 and climbing. Keep it up. Let people see what assumptions look like in real time. The blonde student, Ashley, waited until others left. I need to apologize properly. What I said was racist. I didn't even realize I was doing it, but that's not an excuse. What made you assume I was maintenance? Marcus asked. Ashley struggled with the answer. I guess I've never seen a black TA in the physics department, and the kufi? I didn't expect a Muslim in advanced physics. Why not? I don't know. Media? Movies? I've never thought about it before. That's the problem, not thinking about it. Assumptions become actions, become discrimination. You weren't trying to be racist, but impact matters more than intent. The guy in the varsity jacket, Connor, approached hesitantly. Man, I was a complete asshole. For what it's worth, that equation you solved, I didn't understand a single step. You're clearly brilliant, and I'm clearly an idiot. You're not an idiot, Marcus corrected. You're ignorant. There's a difference. Ignorance can be fixed with education. You just got educated. Emma's live stream had reached 47,000 views. The comment section was a mix of outrage and inspiration. This is why representation matters. He handled that with so much grace. Imagine thinking someone in a kufi can't be a genius. Those students learned a hard lesson. Can Marcus Johnson teach my class? But the truly transformative moment came when Professor Chen called Marcus to her office after class. That was handled beautifully, Professor Chen said, closing her office door. But I need to apologize. Marcus looked surprised. For what? For not preparing them. For not making it clear before class that their TA would challenge their assumptions. For putting you in a position where you had to prove yourself before you even spoke. She pulled up data on her computer.
You're the third black TA in this department's 95-year history. The first Muslim TA ever. I should have made your introduction about credentials, not identity. Instead, I let them see you first and assumed their academic respect would override their bias. You can't control their assumptions, Marcus said.
No, but I can control the department culture that shaped those assumptions. Professor Chen pulled up enrollment statistics. Look at this. Our PhD program has 200 students. 3 are black. None are visibly Muslim. The faculty is 92% white or Asian. No black professors, no Muslim professors. She leaned back in her chair. You shouldn't have to be exceptional to be respected. But in this department, in this field, black and Muslim physicists have to be twice as good to be seen as half as legitimate. So what changes? Marcus asked. You tell me. You're living it. What would make it better? Marcus thought carefully. Representation in recruiting materials, active outreach to HBCUs, mentorship programs, but most importantly, consequences for assumptions. That classroom moment should be mandatory viewing for every incoming student. Professor Chen smiled. Consider it done. Emma's video is now required watching for Physics 401 orientation. 2 weeks later, Emma's TikTok video exploded. 2.3 million views. Featured on Good Morning America. Trending across Twitter, Instagram, Reddit. Boston University physics TA silences assumptions with brilliance. The New York Times. Black Muslim physicist proves stereotypes wrong and viral classroom moment. NPR. Marcus Johnson, the PhD candidate teaching America about implicit bias. Washington Post. Marcus received interview requests from dozens of outlets. He declined most, except one, a podcast specifically for black students considering STEM fields. I didn't solve that equation to prove anything. I solved it because that's what I'm qualified to do. The fact that people are shocked a black Muslim can do physics, that's the real problem we need to solve. That clip from the interview got 5 million views. Boston University's physics department saw a 340% increase in inquiries from underrepresented students. Marcus's inbox filled with messages from black and Muslim students saying he had inspired them to pursue physics. But the most meaningful impact came from his own students. 8 weeks into the semester, Marcus proctored the midterm exam. The same 200 students who dismissed him now respected him. More than that, they learned from him. Ashley, the blonde student who'd first dismissed him, stayed after the exam. Mr. Johnson, can I ask you something personal? Sure. How do you not hate us after how we treated you that first day? Marcus considered the question carefully. Hate takes energy I need for physics. But more than that, I remember being ignorant too. Before I converted to Islam, before I understood systemic racism, I made assumptions. Education changed me. Same thing can change you. Your discussion sections are the best part of this class, not just because you're brilliant, which you are, but because you actually care whether we understand. You don't make us feel stupid for asking questions. That's because I remember being the only black kid in AP Physics in high school. I remember teachers who assumed I cheated because my test scores were too good. I remember the isolation. I won't do that to other students. Connor, the varsity jacket guy, had become Marcus's most dedicated student. He stayed after every discussion section, asking deeper questions, pushing his understanding further. You changed my major, Connor admitted one day. I was pre-med because my parents wanted it, but watching you solve problems, seeing how much you love physics, I switched to physics. My parents are pissed, but I don't care. You showed me what passion looks like. Marcus felt the weight of that responsibility. He wasn't just teaching quantum mechanics. He was changing lives by existing visibly in a space that hadn't made room for people like him. The final lecture of the semester, Professor Chen made an announcement. I'm recommending Marcus Johnson for early PhD completion and a postdoctoral position here at BU. His dissertation defense is scheduled for next month. If accepted, he'll be joining our faculty as an assistant professor. The classroom erupted in applause. Marcus, standing at the side, felt overwhelmed. Assistant professor, faculty, a black Muslim physicist teaching at a major research university. Additionally, the department is establishing the Marcus Johnson Scholarship for underrepresented students in physics. Full tuition, mentorship, and research opportunities. Because talent doesn't have a color or religion, opportunity does. After class, students lined up to thank Marcus, congratulate him, apologize again for that first day. Emma approached with her phone. "Mr. Johnson, I've been documenting your discussion sections all semester, not posting them just for myself. You've taught me more about questioning assumptions than my 4 years of college combined. Thank you."
"What are you studying?" Marcus asked.
"Physics now. I was pre-law. You changed my mind." One by one, students shared similar stories, changed majors, new perspectives, questioned biases they didn't know they had. Marcus realized the equation he'd solved that first day wasn't the most important thing he'd taught them. 3 months later, Marcus defended his dissertation before a panel of the country's top physicists. The room was packed, unusual for a PhD defense. Students from his class attended. Professor Chen beamed from the front row. But most surprising, his family. His mother, who'd worked 2 jobs to help him through undergrad. His younger siblings, who'd never seen a college classroom before. His father, who'd been skeptical about Marcus converting to Islam, but came anyway. "Mr. Johnson," the committee chair began after Marcus's presentation, "in my 40 years evaluating dissertations, I can count on one hand the number that represent genuine breakthrough thinking. Yours is one of them." The committee voted unanimously. Dr. Marcus Johnson, the first black Muslim physics PhD from Boston University. As he walked out of that room, his little sister, 13 years old, grabbed his hand. "Marcus, can girls be physicists too?" "Yeah, baby girl. Girls can be anything. Even black Muslim girls who wear hijab? Especially them, because now they can see it's possible." Dr. Marcus Johnson's first lecture as assistant professor of physics drew attention beyond the department. Media covered it. Students packed the hall. He stood at the front of Lecture Hall 301, the same room where he'd been mistaken for a janitor. "Good morning. I'm Professor Johnson. Before we begin Quantum Mechanics 401, I want to show you something." He played Emma's viral video from a year ago. The students watching him get dismissed. The equation on the board. The revelation. When it ended, Marcus addressed his new students. "A year ago, students in this room assumed I couldn't teach physics because of how I looked. They weren't bad people. They were products of a system that doesn't show black Muslims in STEM, that doesn't represent us in textbooks, in media, in positions of authority." He walked to the whiteboard. "Today, I'm your professor, but I'm still the same person I was a year ago. Same kufi, same skin color, same faith. The only thing that changed was their willingness to question their assumptions." He wrote a new, even more complex equation on the board. "This semester, we're going to study quantum mechanics, but we're also going to study the physics of perception, how observation changes reality, how expectations shape outcomes, how breaking the molds of what's supposed to be can reveal what's actually possible." He paused, looking at the diverse faces in the crowd, more diverse than last year thanks to new recruiting efforts. Some of you are here because you saw a viral video of a black Muslim solving an equation. You thought, maybe I belong in physics too. That's good. But I'm here to tell you something more important. You belong here not because of me, but because physics needs perspectives like yours. Problems get solved faster when different minds attack them. He picked up the marker. Now, let's talk about quantum entanglement. The semester that followed was transformative. Marcus's teaching style, patient, thorough, culturally aware, became the gold standard in the department. Students who struggled elsewhere thrived in his sections. But more meaningfully, the students who didn't look like traditional physicists finally saw themselves reflected. A Somali girl in hijab asked the sharpest questions. A Latino student from South Central LA showed remarkable intuition for complex theories. A Native American woman connected quantum concepts to traditional knowledge in ways that made everyone think differently. Marcus's office hours became legendary. Students didn't just ask about physics, they asked about navigating academia as outsiders, dealing with imposter syndrome, maintaining faith while pursuing science. "Does being Muslim make physics harder?" a student asked during office hours. "The opposite," Marcus replied. "Islam teaches me that the universe operates on divine laws, laws we can discover through observation and mathematics. Physics is just the language God used to write creation. Understanding it brings me closer to my faith, not further."
The conversation shifted the students' entire framework. 3 years later, Dr. Marcus Johnson stood on a stage in Stockholm, receiving the Bergman Prize for Theoretical Physics, the award Professor Chen had mentioned years ago. At 31, he was the youngest recipient ever, the first Black recipient, the first Muslim recipient. His acceptance speech was watched by millions. 3 years ago, I walked into a classroom where students assumed I was the janitor, not because they were malicious, but because they'd never been taught to imagine someone like me as a scientist. Today, I accept this prize not just for my research, but for every Black kid, every Muslim kid, every kid who doesn't see themselves in STEM textbooks. He paused, emotion visible. Science isn't just about solving equations, it's about who gets to solve them, who gets to ask questions, who gets to imagine answers. For too long, brilliant minds have been dismissed because they didn't look like what people expected genius to look like. The camera cut to his mother in the audience crying, to his father beaming with pride despite his initial resistance to Marcus's conversion, to his little sister, now 16 and enrolled in advanced physics. This prize represents millions of dollars in research funding. I'm dedicating it to creating pipeline programs for underrepresented students, because the next breakthrough in physics shouldn't depend on the student being exceptional enough to overcome bias. It should depend on them being good enough, period. The standing ovation lasted 8 minutes. 5 years later, Dr. Marcus Johnson, now Associate Professor and Department Chair Diversity Officer, stood in the same lecture hall where his journey began. But this time, he wasn't there to teach. He was there to introduce the department's first Black Muslim female faculty member, Dr. Aaliyah Thompson, whose dissertation on quantum computing had revolutionized the field. 5 years ago, Marcus told the assembled students and faculty, I was mistaken for a janitor in this room. Today, I have the honor of welcoming someone who will never experience what I did, because we've built a department where her presence isn't surprising. Dr. Thompson took the podium, her hijab styled elegantly, her confidence palpable. Dr. Johnson's story inspired me to pursue physics. But more than inspiration, he created the infrastructure that made it possible. The scholarships, the mentorship, the departmental changes that meant I wasn't the only one. She gestured to the audience, where Black, Latino, Asian, Muslim, Jewish, and students of all backgrounds filled the seats. This is what physics is supposed to look like, not because of quotas or political correctness, but because brilliant minds come in all packages, and the universe doesn't care what you look like when you discover its secrets. After the ceremony, Marcus found Emma, the student who'd live-streamed that first day. She was now a physics PhD candidate herself. I still have that video, Emma said. It's unlisted now, but I watch it sometimes to remind myself how much I didn't know, how much I've grown. Growth is the point, Marcus replied. That video wasn't about humiliating you, it was about education. You learned, you changed, you're teaching others now. That's how systems transform, one person at a time. The Marcus Johnson effect, as it became known in academic circles, rippled across universities nationwide. Physics departments increased diversity recruiting by 300%. 47 universities implemented assumption-challenging orientation videos. The American Physical Society created the Johnson Fellowship for underrepresented physicists. Textbooks began featuring diverse scientists prominently. Most meaningfully, the number of Black and Muslim students pursuing physics PhDs increased 185% over 5 years. Marcus's viral moment had become a movement. But for Marcus, the real victory was quieter. It was the Somali girl who graduated with honors, the Latino student who published groundbreaking research, the Native American woman who became department chair at another university. It was every student who walked into a classroom and didn't have to prove they belonged because someone who looked like them was already there, teaching, leading, excelling. A classroom that thought he was the janitor, an equation solved in 4 minutes, a viral video that changed academia. But the real story wasn't about Marcus's brilliance, though he was brilliant. It was about what happens when we question our assumptions, when we create space for people who don't fit narrow definitions of genius, when we understand that talent has no color, no religion, no expected appearance. Marcus Johnson didn't change physics by solving one equation. He changed it by existing loudly in a space that hadn't made room for him, by teaching with grace when he could have responded with anger, by building infrastructure so others wouldn't face what he faced. That's how real change happens, not through viral moments, though they help. Through sustained, patient, deliberate work to transform systems that exclude into systems that include. The equation was impressive. The transformation was revolutionary. Have you been dismissed because of your appearance? Assumed to be less capable because of your faith? Told you don't belong in spaces where you're qualified? Share your story. Document assumptions. Challenge bias when you see it. Subscribe for more stories of people who transform discrimination into systemic change through patience, excellence, and determination. Because the next generation deserves to walk into classrooms where they see themselves reflected in positions of authority.